I think I did. Yeah. So a few things to remember. So the first thing is, remember, you are going to fill out that IMD for every student, right? For all situations, whether it's that emergency contingency plan, that hybrid, or that virtual. So every student is going to have one of these IMDs completed. For students whose families have chosen that full virtual model, right? You've given them the option of either that virtual model or a hybrid model. You must hold a meeting. So you are going to get together a team for this is just for families who have chosen the full virtual. And you're going to discuss expectations, how a FAPE will be provided, what services are going to look like, etc. We know in a virtual model it may look a little bit different. So for those, we feel that there will be much more discussion that occurs. So we want an IEP team together to make those decisions. For students whose parents have chosen a hybrid model, you may do those IMDs without a meeting with parent permission. So we're still going to reach out to the parent, we're still going to talk with them, and we're going to get their permission to do it without a meeting. If parent says, no, I would like a meeting, then you need to hold a meeting. Okay? In all cases, whether you're holding a meeting or not, you are not actually changing the IEP itself. We are not changing that IEP from that 5-day face-to-face instruction. You are literally just completing that IMD and a PWN. So you're not actually going in, making any amendments to the IEP. You're doing an amendment cover page. So you can do that PWN. You'll indicate if a meeting was held or a meeting wasn't held, and you'll put the information. We sent out samples of both the IMDs as well as PWNs last week. So we did a things to consider with PWN, and then I also did a sample of kind of what it would look like we did in the spring for you. So it's all laid out there for you. We would like those IMDs completed within 15 school days of your year starting. So that's essentially 3 weeks from the day school starts. If you need more time, just let Susan or I know. We'll work with you, right? This is not, OSIS is asking us to do this. They haven't given us a timeline. We are putting a timeline on it because, we don't want these things hanging out all year. So we're asking 15 school days, which is 3 weeks. We think that's reasonable. But if for some reason you're really struggling with it, then, let us know. You should have, and many of you have already started doing this since we had our call last week. If you have questions regarding this specific process that are time sensitive, then reach out to us. If not, just email us your questions and we'll address them in our weekly calls. Okay, so we're going to hold off on questions for that, but we just wanted to review this process just to make sure it was clear with everybody why we're doing, what exactly to do. So some updates in Enrich. So when you're adding staff to Enrich, please remember they must have a school-based email address. We are no longer giving access to Gmails or Hotmails or left mails or right mails, whatever it may be. They have to have a school-based email address. If they are a contract service provider, which we have many of, make sure that they are not already in our system. So you want to make sure that they're already not working at one of our schools, and you accomplish that by asking them, or that they haven't had access. If they are in one of our schools or have been, just let Susan or I know. We can just add those schools to them, and they don't need new login information. They can continue to log in, and we can add those schools to their Enrich. Okay, so you want to make sure we're still having some people that are coming in as duplicates. And also remember that they are under contract services. You do not put them specifically under your school. You put them under contract services.
Do not go in and do cognito tickets to change if they're not the way we just described. We will do a cleanup on them, on those users, and notify you we're doing it in like next month.
Yep. Susan, you want to go over this?
Okay, so a memo was issued from the Department of Ed in July requiring that all students K through ninth grade have to have pre and post assessments to kind of look at whatever knowledge was lost from what happened in the spring. So the State Department requires assessments on all children, kindergarten through ninth grade, within the first 10 days of school. So there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. It's just required. Those assessments, the pre-assessment within the first 10 days of school, can occur or can have already occurred during LEAP or ARC days, which is the academic recovery ARC is, if your school said they were going to do it. So not all schools did ARC days. But, and if they weren't done during those days, they have to be done during the first 10 days of school. Then again, a post-assessment has to be administered before the end of this calendar year in December, not the end of this school year, but the end of this calendar year. And on Tuesday, the State Department issued a clarifying memo regarding students with significant cognitive disabilities. So that would be our population of students with disabilities who would be qualifying for the alternative assessment. We know who those kids are, third grade and up, because of the alternative assessments that are given. What we have not done is identified those kids kindergarten, first and second grade. So the State Department is requiring an IEP team to decide if the standard assessments that were given, and I think I can't remember off the top of my head, Laura, if you know, but like one of the assessments was iReady. What's the other one?
Map. STAR.
Yeah, so there's a list of them that were given that's on the link for the first memo on section A of our agenda. And if a student cannot take those approved assessments for reading and math, because those are the only areas that have to be assessed, with appropriate accommodations, then an IEP team has to determine how their pre and post progress is being measured. You guys, and I reread this memo about 10 times just to make sure I was hearing it right. It does say an IEP team must determine. So there is no going around that. And basically, you have to determine how progress is going to be measured. And pretty much that's going to mean it's based on probably academic skills in reading and math that are associated directly in some capacity to IEP goals. Since you cannot submit that documentation for the approved, if the team determines that kid cannot take that assessment, there is a rubric. So item number I in this agenda has a link with the rubric. And you have to fill this out on every kid that has significant cognitive disabilities that does not take an assessment pre and post in the approved list. Both of those memos are listed for you. And the reason we highlight this is because pretty much we know this is going to be your guys' responsibility on this population. We don't have a huge population of these kids, you guys. So pay attention, because the state is requiring pre and post data submitted to them on every single child in every district, okay? If you have questions, since I'm the alternative assessment contact, if you have questions, please let me know. I know Meyer Center folks are already working with Laura, so keep on doing that. But anyone else, just let me know, because this is like a different path for those kind of kids. Laura, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think again, I say no, and then I always do. I think it's really important to remember that last point, that if you're utilizing that rubric and you are saying the student has significant cognitive disabilities and can't do any of the assessments, you must have that documentation to demonstrate, right? This is not a broad stroke. This is much like when we look at students who get oral accommodations, or we should be looking at like when student gets oral accommodations or students taking the SCL, right? We have to have that documentation to show that they have that significant cognitive disability that impedes them from doing any sort of assessment. Now, you may not use the STAR, you may not use MAP, you may use something else. That's okay. I mean, I put out there things like Brigance and things like that. Those are other ways to assess that you can, that you wouldn't necessarily mean that they're not going to get assessed at all. So be really careful when you're looking at these students. It really is only going to be a handful in our district.
Yeah, it's not, it's just what concerns me on this is those kids that we haven't identified because of standardized testing. So we really have to be mindful and look at those kindergarten, first and second graders.
Right.
And just because they're developmentally delayed or they're maybe ID classification or have more of a moderate form of autism does not mean they qualify for alternative assessment.
Right. So one of the other things we did was we did have some general questions that had come up that we added to this that we'll go over, and then we're going to open this up to questions and answers because this is all we really have for today. It was just really a review and to talk about the assessment piece. But the first question was, we have several IEP students who have chosen virtual for the entire year. So what do I put in the contingency and the hybrid sections? So what we've said is that we are asking you to fill out every section of the IMD because we know that parents may opt to change or school leaders or whoever may allow them to change. The contingency may be similar to the virtual since they are essentially both a virtual model, but in some cases it may be different, right? That contingency is for no longer than that 2-week period. So things may be different. School schedules may be changed, things like that, because of that emergency situation versus, hey, I'm going to be here online all year, right? The hybrid section is just in case you can't go 5 days a week face-to-face. It's going to address that in class per the intent of the IEP and that virtual combo in any capacity. We are asking that you account for any situation. So if something changes, you're not going to have to fill this out again, or you're not going to have to hold another meeting. So yes, we understand it's more work on the front end. We get that. But in the long run, it should potentially save you all some time. The next one, we have students who have chosen to do virtual for the first 9 weeks, then reevaluate. How do I do the IMD? Again, you're completing this for all 3 scenarios. So you wouldn't have to change anything because then you've done that hybrid model already in that initial meeting or that initial conversation. So you're going to address it from the get-go. Remember, your present levels, goals, all that shouldn't change based on going from face-to-face to virtual. Accommodations may look a little different, and of course, delivery is going to look a little different, but in some cases, services may change depending on the child. But again, those are ones you're going to hold meetings on and have those conversations with the team. As long as it's an IEP team decision and you all have the documentation and everything to support, we're not going to question it. And then the last one, it appears that all 3 areas on the IMD would be relevant for only in-person kids. That's not true. The hybrid model is the only one that addresses the face-to-face and is in the live school setting. The other 2 are essentially virtual. So they don't address, they're not all for in-person.
And the reason the hybrid model does address the face-to-face because it's in conjunction with a virtual model. So together, those 2 settings make a full instructional model for a kid versus just 5 days a week face-to-face with all kids. There's one more question that did come out, and I think this is a good question. I don't know if we've really addressed it. We just assumed everyone knew, but for students that are transferring in and you need to do comparable services within 5 days of school starting, you can do the IMD along with it. Make sure though you adhere to those components of talking to parents, letting them understand what this looks like. So because since the comparable services doesn't require a meeting, they can be in conjunction. Make sure that if a parent has a question, even the new move-in kids, if you need to, you will hold a meeting if there's questions or concerns.
All right.
So Jean has a question. Does FAPE apply for students that choose virtual school? Yes.
Yes.
So students with disabilities are a protected class federally. So are students with 504s. So are students that have ESOL services. FAPE must be given regardless the model of instruction. That is the whole reason the state had rolled out this IMD I want to say IMD document, but that's redundant, right? IM document maybe, but that's the whole reason they rolled it out, to ensure that the people who know, the stakeholders of the child, are collaborating to ensure FAPE is provided in whatever setting of instruction.
Your question about can they come back, Jean, is up to your school and what the school put in place in terms of their plan. Did the parent, was it said to parents, if you choose virtual, you're choosing it for the entire school year? If that's the case, then technically they couldn't come back face to face. But again, we all know that there may be potential situations where students would come back. So that's not a special ed decision. That's a building leader school decision. So I'm going to stop recording at this point so you guys can feel free to ask any questions. I'm also going to stop sharing my screen. So this is it in terms of the information, and then we'll keep on to do some questions and answers. So let me stop recording.